Great. Well, thank you all. Good morning, and thank you all for joining us. My name is Jesus Sanchez. I am the Great Lakes Restoration Community Grant Program Manager with Restore America's Estuaries, and you're here to participate in our SAM.gov and UEI registration webinar as it relates to our Great Lakes Restoration request for applications, which is currently open. We appreciate your time and just your interest. This is part of one of many different sections that we'll be offering throughout the course of the application as it's open. These are not necessarily limited to those that are pursuing this particular grant program funding. This is also applicable to other federal grants or funding that you might be you're interested in pursuing or available, as well as just other opportunities out there. So hopefully it offers some insight and some information if it's new to you. If it's not new to you, then and hopefully it's a review and adding to your already base of knowledge. And so I wanted to start off. We have several members of the Restore America's Estuaries team here. I'm the program director, as I mentioned. I want to offer an opportunity for our program associate to introduce themselves. And Justice, we'll hold off on you until we get started with your portion of the presentation.
Yeah, thank you, Jesus. Hello, everyone. My name's Lisette Perez. I'm the program associate for the Great Lakes Restoration Community Grant Program here at Restore America's Estuaries. And I've been here for a little bit over a year now, and I've been supporting the communications, engagement, and outreach. So if anyone has any questions after this, feel free to contact me. And thank you, everyone, for joining us. I'll pass it back to you, Jesus.
All right, thanks, Lisette. And just want to make sure that you all put faces with the names, as this is our Great Lakes Community Grant Program team. And so at any point, if there's any questions throughout the program or going forward, don't hesitate to reach out to any one of us. And so I just want to, review a couple components of the Great Lakes Restoration Community Grant Program, particularly the application process. Right now, we are in the first step, which is the letter of intent. It was opened on November 3rd. Those will be due on January 16th. And that'll be followed by invitations to submit to a full proposal, which will be the week of February 23rd. Those invitations will go out with an invitation for those will have to submit their full proposals. Those will be due on April 17th to give you a sense of that timeline. And then the letter of intent has 6 different sections. Today's content and information will primarily be focused on section 2 of the application. So you can see there the employer identification number through SAM.gov. And one thing I did want to mention regarding that is that it is not required to have your UEI information at the time of the letter of intent. So hopefully that gives you some alleviation in terms of if you don't have this in place as of now and need to go through this process, there still is some time to obtain that information. And just to mention that it is something that's necessary for any other type of federal grant or federal award that you pursue in the future. So just something to consider and something good to have. The overall timeline, as I mentioned, the letter of intent, the 6 sections that you just saw on the previous slide is due on the 16th. The notice of awards for this particular grant will be in May of 2026 with an anticipated start date of, August of 2026. And so there's a 2 to 3 year timeline on completion of projects at the start of August of 2026 from that date. Another thing to note is that, this is one of two sessions that we have this month. Next week, you can join us again for budgeting and how to develop your RFA budget, particularly as it applies to the current application that we have, how to navigate that, some things to consider what are some components and allowable costs within the budget. So we'll go over some of those components, and the team that's here will be available that day as well. So all of this information, that's something that interested you, or if you want to review some of the previous information resources that we have, it's all available on our webpage. The request for application itself is downloadable, but if you scroll to the bottom of this page, you'll find all of our informational webinars, information sessions, recordings, any documents or information that we provide, slides, etc. Those are all available on this particular site here. And again, here's our contact information. Please do not hesitate to reach out if you have any questions throughout the application process or follow up to some of these sessions and information. We're happy to answer any questions as you have them. And with that, I'm going to stop sharing my screen here and we'll turn it over to you, Justice, to give a little introduction and go from there. And you're on mute. Yep.
Thank you. All right, good morning, everyone. My name is Justice Davis, and I am one of the grant administrators here at Restore America's Estuaries. I manage several programs for the organization, and one of those programs is the Great Lakes Initiative. So I am grateful and happy that all of you could join us for me to walk you through this process. I've been through this a couple of times before in previous lives, so I understand some of the difficulties and challenges that some of you may face, and I'm here to help you through it to let you know that it's pretty easy or relatively straightforward, I'll say. So would you like for me to share my screen on my side?
Yes, please.
Perfect. Can everyone see?
Yes.
All
Yes,
right,
we can see.
wonderful. And so today, as Jesus previously mentioned, we're going to talk about the UEI, how to register in SAM.gov. And I'm going to give you some additional details to kind of help you walk through the process. So that way you're well informed and you know what to expect as you're going through getting some of these things that are required for the award. So let's just go over some of the terms that you'll see in the award application, right? The UEI is what we're aiming to get. That's a unique identifier they give to all organizations that receive some sort of federal funding. So
Hey,
that is
Justice,
required.
excuse me. Sorry, are you, I don't believe you're in presenter mode because we can't see the acronyms or the words that you're trying to
Oh,
mention.
hold on. Oh, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Mm, Let me do this a little differently. Let me stop sharing for a second.
Mm-hmm.
That's content only. Even this. Okay. Let me reshare. What about now? Can you?
There it
Yes,
is. Yeah.
you could see
Thank
it.
you.
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Sorry about that, you guys. So to talk about some of the terms and things that you'll see, just so you're not confused when you come across it, all of these terms are not necessary. All these things that are mentioned right here on this acronym sheet, they're not necessarily things you actually have to worry about. I just want to kind of briefly mention some of those things so that way you're aware of what it is when you see it. So the UEI is what we're aiming to get. That is something that's required for all federal awards, and it's basically the number or the code that they use to track all the awards throughout the process, right? So whether you apply for this award and you are awarded other awards, other federal government grant opportunities, this is the number that you'll use and they'll track all that information in the system. SAM.gov is actually the management system that they utilize to track all of that stuff internally. So that's the actual platform that you'll be getting in to manage things like your UEI and some of your documentation requests from the federal government. The General Services Administration is the actual federal government agency that manages all of this. And they've got some great resources on their website as well for other things that we'll go over in different trainings. The taxpayer identification number and the EIN number, everybody should be familiar with that. That's what you're given from the IRS. Sometimes from a state entity, kind of depending on what state you're in, they'll give you some sort of code similar to that, pretty much, and that's just to kind of help validate that information on that end. I think we're all familiar with the IRS. The marketing partner identification number is a number that they're going to give you in the system when you register, so you don't have to worry about that. The cage code is also the same thing. It's a number in the system that they're going to give to you. So you don't have to worry about that because those are not necessarily required for this award. You'll see me constantly refer to the term POC, which stands for point of contact. And that's just the individual that you want for the federal government to reach out in relation to different business matters. And we'll go over that in a later slide. The Federal Acquisitions Regulations, that is one of those huge rulemaking bodies, just like the Code of Federal Regulations. And pretty much what the Federal Acquisitions Regulations is about is acquisitions and procurement mostly. So how do you buy and purchase things according to federal rules? And some of those will be flow down requirements into your awards. The Code of Federal Regulations, that's the rulemaking body that dictates how we manage everything on the grant management side. Then you have electronic fund transfers. That's something that's kind of bank related, so you don't have to worry too much about that. Any of that information you need, you can get directly from the banks that you utilize. Then there's the FAFATA. You generally don't have to worry about that. That's more of an internal thing that we do when we award you. That's just something that we send over to the federal government to advise them of how much money you've been awarded, different things like that. And then the automated clearinghouse. So for those of you who are not aware and not finance people, that's the system that they utilize to pull money out your bank account. And there's certain information that they utilize to pull that information from that does like a keyword validation match, things like your name, your address, your routing, your account number. So some of that information as you're filling out this form is very important that it's entered accurately. Otherwise, certain processes break down later down the line. Can we see this slide? Okay, perfect. So as I previously mentioned, the UEI is pretty much the government identifier that they use to identify who you are as an organization. You need it for the financial awards, and then you can get it on SAM.gov. I'm going through a lot of this information relatively quickly because they have made some great changes in the system for you guys, and I want to get to that so I can show you guys how to navigate that because I think they've made it relatively simple and easy for you guys to get a UEI now in comparison to how they've done it years ago. So pretty much at the bare minimum, you're going to need your legal business name. Now, that is the way your organization is listed on your documents. So how they put it on your EIN form, the form that you get from the IRS that gives you that code or that number to identify you with the IRS, that is how it needs to be listed on the UEI. This is a common mistake that organizations have made in the past when they register for this. And this makes the difference whether it will take 2 weeks for you to get a UEI number or 6 months. Now that has significantly changed, and so I think we are in a bit of luck, but just be aware. To give you an example of that, in the name of our organization, Restore America's Estuaries, there is an apostrophe after the S. And in some databases you use to look up our organization, if you don't put that apostrophe there, our organization won't show up. Your physical address, so when each of you registered your organization at some point in time and incorporated and went through the whole process of getting a LLC or a 501c3, you had to have a physical address. Notice it says that no PO boxes are allowed. The date of incorporation is also on that paperwork, and that was pretty much just the date your organization started in your state of incorporation. Relatively straightforward. That's the state that your organization is registered in. Now, if you're an organization that's registered in multiple states, usually on that paperwork, it will give you the origin state in which your organization has started. That would apply to corporate-like nonprofits like the Y and the Boys and Girls Club and Big Brothers and Big Sisters that are across multiple state lines. But usually with organizations like that, they have their own separate information, particular to the state that they work in. Not necessarily the case with every organization, but if that's the case for your organization, it's usually whatever state your organization was started in. So the reason why all of these are important is because now the federal government does something that's called validation. So if you put in enough of these characteristics, what will happen is the government will take time to search through the databases that they have because they have access to the IRS systems. They've got access to other information systems, and they'll be able to pull your organization's information system up. Pull your excuse me, let me slow down. Pull your organization's information up. So a lot of these processes can be bypassed, but that just kind of depends on what information you have and what information is available to you. I know that everybody is in a different space. I know that some people, you're kind of just trying to help an organization out and they may not necessarily know where all that information is. I know some of you may not fully be aware if your organization has a UEI or not. When we go into the system, I'll show you how to validate that information and look up that information, and that'll help you kind of streamline the process a little bit. If for whatever reason validation fails, you'll have to submit a help ticket to the Federal Service Desk. So when you're going there in the system, they have a button that you can click and it'll automatically send a request to them. And what somebody from their support team will do is reach out to you. Then there's this public visibility option. So pretty much what this does is it allows your organization, the registration information you have, to be publicly searchable. So just a couple of things here. It's totally at your discretion, but what I would recommend that you do is make it publicly visible. The reason for that is individuals like me, I know how to go in the system and find your organization. So if for whatever reason at some point in time changes are made in your organization, somebody forgets the information or they can't find it or something happens with your login, what I would have the ability to do at that point is go in and pull the information directly up, print it out. And throughout this process, one of the requirements throughout the period of performance of your award is that you have to have a UEI that's up to date, and you usually do that on an annual basis. So if for whatever reason there was some turnover or changes within your organization, and the individual who initially applied for this is no longer a part of your organization, I still have the ability to go in and access that information for you if you can't access it yourself. So that's one of the benefits of being publicly visible, but again, totally at your discretion. And so some of this general business information is information that's on your internal documents that you have at your agency. Anything business related, so like that IRS form, or depending on the state, information that's hosted at your Secretary of State, if that's how your state is organized, or your State Department, they usually have that information. So just a couple of things I want to go over. Your organization start date is relatively straightforward. Your fiscal year end date is the date at which you close your accounting systems. Some people do a calendar year fiscal year end date. That means that you end in December. Some people follow the federal government's calendar, which, correct me if I'm wrong, I believe that's September when the federal government calendars in. That's what we call the actual fiscal year. So this depends on your organization. I know some organizations do May. So if you're not 100% aware of that information, I'd recommend that you reach out to someone in your internal operations. Or if that's an outsourced function within your organization, I'd recommend that you reach out to someone who works in accounting. They should be able to provide you with that information relatively easily. The division name, number, and organizational website, they're not required. Generally, if you don't know if you have a division name or number or not, I'll say you probably don't have one. Again, that's something that applies to organizations that work across state lines and have multiple entities. One good example of that would be the Audubon Society, right? Sometimes you'll have an Audubon Society at the state level, and then you'll have local chapter levels. So that's where that will apply. The MPIN, as I mentioned before, is something that they'll give you during registration. Now you have your physical address, which can't be a PO box, but your mailing address can be a PO box. Let's see, the IRS consent form, that may be a process that they've kind of gotten rid of because they're now actively using the IRS system. What that meant at a certain point in time was that the IRS needed physical consent from you to allow you to share that information with the federal government. So depending on when we go in the system, what it requires, they've got a direct link to get you to that form that you can fill out and sign electronically. It'll automatically send to the IRS an update. And your cage code and in cage code. So if you see these things, don't necessarily worry about them. These are basically the moments in time in my career where I've seen a cage code and an in cage code had to do with defense spending. And so generally, if you're not an organization that engages in that, which I'm not 100% certain, but I don't think that would be the case. You don't have to worry about having that information. Again, that's something that they would automatically assign to you. All right. So let's see here. General organizational information that it may ask you for. So your country and state of incorporation, your company and employee security clearance levels. That's not required. But if you have that information, here's what I will say. The more information you have that you can provide, the better it is. You can always make updates in the system and changes as your organization scales and grows. But if you have access to that information now, the recommendation is to go ahead and put it in there. But if you don't have it, don't worry about it. Your institution type. Now, disadvantaged business enterprise status. So that's the woman owned, the African American owned, the Native American owned, those type of business entity types. They would want to know that information to be able to track that. Your Native American entity type, if you are a tribal entity, and I'm not 100% certain what form or where you would find that information, but we do have someone who has worked with tribal entities on our staff that I could reach out to for that information. Organizational factors. Now, this tends to throw nonprofit organizations off. I think some people don't realize is that most of the time, I'll say in my experiences and in the state that I live in, most of the time a nonprofit is started as a corporation. That may vary depending on your state, but you'll have paperwork that has all that information for you. So one of the things that I'm going to do, because I know I'm going to through this relatively quickly, is for the next couple of weeks, I'll have some open office hours for those of you who may have special circumstances, and I can help you review that information and make some determinations so that way you know how to best put that information in the system. And then let's see, socioeconomic status, veteran owned, minority owned, etc. One thing that I want to point out with all these different business entity types is if you're operating as a nonprofit and you're the individual who founded your nonprofit, I just want to say, because I've had this conversation several times, you cannot own a nonprofit. So a nonprofit cannot be classified as minority owned or veteran owned because you don't technically own that. Just to give you guys a quick heads up. Financial information. So when you go into the system, it's going to ask you a couple of questions like, do you want to accept credit cards? There are some federal programs that instead of doing the whole money transfer thing and setting you up in an ASAP account and giving you all this other information, they'll just send you a credit card as a payment. That's usually for smaller programs and programs that fall in a special HUD. I don't think that anything in the environmental space looks like that. I've never come across it. Um, But I will say, if you see that as an option, I would recommend that you be open to any way the federal government wants to pay you to do certain programs. So for your electronics fund transfer information, very important, simple information, account type, route number, account number. The information that you put in previously with your organization's name and all of that being correct and aligning with your paperwork could potentially have an effect on this process later down the line, because if you don't put that information exactly how it is with how you've established it with your bank, it could bounce back. Now, again, they've made a lot of changes over the years, a lot of great changes to this process. So that may not necessarily be an issue any longer, but just something I want to make you aware of, just to make sure whatever documentation you're using to help you fill this out, make sure it is accurate and to the T of what you have on the actual documentation. And then you have an ACH phone number. That's something you can get directly from your bank. Pretty much that's a banking transaction. It's kind of a little hard to explain, but they've got this weird way of making sure that they can validate it's your bank account. And that's all that's about. They want to make sure they're paying the right person that they're supposed to pay. So that's information that you can get from your financial institution or banking institution. And then you have a remittance address. That may be different than your physical address and your mailing address. It may all be one and the same. Pretty much that's the address where you send all that bank information to. That's all that means. So executive compensation questions. So for those of you who get more than 80% of the revenue from federal sources, or you have more than $25 million from federal sources, you have to list the compensation of your top 5 executives. Now, how you classify executives is kind of at your discretion, right? Everybody's organization is structured a little differently. You know, some people have a president and CEO, vice president structure. Some people have an executive director like structure. Your manager may be considered one of your executive employees. That's at your discretion to decide that. But if you don't have that information publicly accessible, you would need to list the top 5 employees if you have that many employees within your organization and their compensation. Now, I will say if you are a nonprofit organization and you file a 990, you don't necessarily have to worry about that because that information is on your 990. That's going to relate to that last bullet that says if the public doesn't have access to that information. Your 990 makes that information publicly accessible. So this slide, there's a lot of different things here. You have the federal acquisitions regulations, which is those rules that we were talking about earlier that talk about government procurement. And basically what this says is if your organization has ever been involved in any sort of litigation, or if you've ever been suspended before, it's going specifically to your organization. So right here, if we jump a couple of bullet points down, and it talks about you must report if you've been in any criminal proceedings involving conviction and admission of fault. Let me just give you some perspective on this because I worked in HR once upon a time. And of course, as you notice, and I worked for a business, and sometimes what happens is the company you work for, they get sued and there's millions of dollars, right? Those are not situations that apply to this. This is not an individual thing. This is about the organization as a whole. So if you don't know that this has ever happened, the answer is it probably has not happened. So as you go in the system, depending on the type of financial assistance or the type of award you're looking to get and apply to, I would recommend that you reach out to someone if you have been involved in this to see if you need to report it or not. Again, it's not about you as an individual, it's about your organization if your organization has been involved in that. And so this just talks about things like, again, if you've ever been debarred or suspended, or if you've ever gotten in trouble with the federal government before with respect to federal money, that's all this is basically saying. Those are things they would need you to report in your application, and that's with respect to your organization as a whole and not you as an individual. So there's also going to be a section on this application, and it's going to ask you to certify certain things. This is also something that when we get to a certain point in the award, depending on if you have this filled out in your system of award management or not, is going to depend on if I ask you for some of these things. Now, most of this stuff you don't necessarily have to worry about, right? A lot of these are what we call common law practices, right? You have to comply with them anyway, like the Civil Rights Act and Section 504 and Age Discrimination Act. The False Claims Act pretty much is about your character, just to say, you promise that you're not going to lie to the federal government. You're not going to take any money. You're not going to do anything wrong. The Lobby and Disclosure Act, all that basically says is that if you're an organization that engages in lobbying activities, you're going to report that to the federal government. And then see, NEPA is an EPA specific thing. And then there's debarment and suspension. So debarment and suspension is about, has the federal government ever told you that you're not allowed to get federal awards because of certain activities or actions that have happened? Different things like that. Does anybody want me to specifically go over any of the policy requirements that are listed here? Because they're mostly relatively straightforward, but if you had a particular question, I wanted to address it really quickly for you if I could. No questions? Okay, cool. So here we have our persons of contacts. That's what that POC stands for. And these three are mandatory when it comes to accounts receivables, and that's pretty much just the financial person. Your electronic business matters, and so those are requests that they're going to send you in the system of things you need to follow up on. And then government business matters. So these individuals don't necessarily have to be different people. You can have two people serving in one capacity. It can be all the same person. It kind of depends. And then you have some optional persons of contact you can put in there. Now, again, if you don't have that information, no big deal. Don't worry about it. Fill out the information that you have. Here is what I will advise you to do, because this has happened to me several times, and this has happened to several organizations I have worked with. You'll have one person who will fill out the UEI, and then something happens and they're no longer with the organization. And the people who are left behind have no idea who was put on that account for a UEI. So I'd recommend you put at least a backup person. So in the event that that does happen, that does set you up for success later. So that way you don't necessarily have to worry about scrambling and trying to figure out who has access to all this information at the federal government and why you can't access that. Um, Two additional people if possible, right? Because sometimes, again, life happens to people. You never know what the future holds. And so that sets you up to be in the best position to be successful in the event that someone does move away from your organization or leave for whatever reason, or something does happen. And the person who you had listed in there, you can't access that information anymore because you don't want to lose access to that information. Now, if that does happen, you can definitely go in there and get it back, but it's a bit of a process. So that is the end of my presentation. And I know I went fast, but does anyone have any questions?
Yeah, and feel free to, if you want to come off mute and ask a question, you're more than welcome to do that as well, or you can drop a question in the chat.
Hi. I was just wondering, I was going through the information and it talks about login.gov in order to get into the system. We did have a person, we're a very small nonprofit, and the person left. So I'm just trying to anticipate, will the new person's login.gov, can that be linked to the SAM.gov account, or how might that work?
That is absolutely how that process works. So what I will tell you is when you go in and put the information in, and I'll show you, it does say update information. And so you do have the option to update that. And it'll ask you for a few documents like your articles of incorporation or your federal government taxpayer identification paperwork for you to upload into the system. But basically, when that happens and someone leaves the organization, when you go to log in, it'll say you already have a UEI. And so
Right.
what you can do is link directly to that. And then there's an option in there for you to reach specifically out to the person and they can connect the account. You just send them a couple sentences and say, hey, the individual who signed up for this is no longer with our organization and we need to get access to this to apply for the awards.
Okay, so that's in the SAM system. We send a message to some administrator or something then?
Yes, sir. And I'm gonna show you, I'm gonna walk through the steps really quickly and show you exactly how to do it.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Great, thank you for the question. Any other questions?
You want me to go straight to the system and show them how to?
Yeah, I think that'd be a good next step. And again, if you don't feel comfortable, come off mute, feel free to drop questions in the chat. I'll address them.
Okay, this is my messy screen. Let me just drag my browser over here. Perfect. So we're going to go to SAM.gov. And I'm going to go over here to sign in. Click agree. Now, the one pain point that I will tell you, when you first do a login.gov, make sure you have a backup because a couple of months ago, what happened was I ended up getting a new phone because my old phone was damaged and I didn't have access to this little app that they require, which is Microsoft Authenticator or a different authentication app, whatever you have. And I couldn't log in. So I had to go through and delete my entire account and get a new one. So when you sign into SAM.gov, this is what the dashboard looks like. So what you'll do, this automatically took me to Workspace, but right here in the top right corner, when you sign in, it's going to have a Workspace button if it doesn't automatically bring you there, and you're going to click on that. So to your question earlier, you see how you needed to gain access? You would click on Recover Entity. And if you need help, as I stated, I will have some open office hours next week that I can help you walk through this specifically so I can help you get back and get access to your UEI. But you're going to want to go to add new entity for those of you who haven't registered in the system of award management before or not. And so it's going to ask you these questions because it's pre-qualifying you because it wants to determine how much information you're going to need to provide. So this is with a business or other organization and to receive a subaward under a federal grant or financial assistance program. And then we are a nonprofit organization. So you're going to click that. And when you click next, it's going to give you options right here. Sometimes it'll come up with 2, sometimes it'll come up with 3, but they've adjusted the system now to where you can get this simple, unique entity ID only, and you don't have to worry about a lot of the other information, which I think is great because it is so straightforward. So I'm just going to click select right here. It's going to ask you to put a legal business name right here. So what I did when I looked at the registrations is I went in here and checked, and most of you guys are already in the system, so you'll be able to directly link with your organization. Let me show you what that looks like. I'm going to use Ray as an example. Make sure you put in this country tab right here because I noticed a couple of times I went straight to the address and overlooked the country, and it doesn't populate for you. And if this doesn't highlight green, it's not going to let you click search. What is our address, you guys? Let's see real quick. I should know our address, but let's see. Contact us. Here we go. 2005.
Did you get the address? It's 601 13.
13th Street.
Yep.
So I'm going to just click search right here at the bottom. And my organization pulled right up. Now, when I click next, a couple of different things are going to happen. You see right here where it says we have an active registration. If you have an active registration and you don't know how to get in there, I would recommend you click the update registration. And I'm just going to do this for kicks and giggles. Hey, Seuss, do not be alarmed. This is not going to change anything because I'm not going to hit submit. But I'm just going to click on update registration. That is not what it was supposed to do. Okay, let's go back. Go back. Yeah, this system is a little wonky sometimes. Okay, let's start over. I'm gonna select this. Okay, I'm gonna ask for a volunteer. Would someone like me can I use someone's organization as an example to show you how they've streamlined this process and how simple this is?
Yeah, we have any volunteers willing to share some info?
You can use mine. What do you need?
What's the name of your organization?
Cultivating Currents.
Cultivating Currents. You're located in the United States, correct?
Yep.
What's your
1602. Simon Street. Yep.
oh, and what's the zip code?
82070.
82070. Thank you so much. So we're going to click search.
And
There
there
we
I am.
go.
Yep.
Perfect. So then we're going to go next. You have an active registration as well.
Yep.
So then you can request a role with your organization or go to the workspace. So if you can't get in there, you request a role. I am trying to show you guys. So it's really simple when you go in here. And maybe when I did this the other day, I should have recorded the steps to show you guys. So I can probably send that as follow-up material. But basically, when you go in there, it's going to ask you for your incorporation details. So it's going to ask you the start date of your organization, and you enter it into a form. And then it's going to ask you to upload information to support that. So once you upload information to support that, you click submit. If you've got any notes you want to send to them as they're reviewing it, you put that information in there as well. And once you press submit, you're done. So this has significantly streamlined a lot of information that you may have felt like you previously needed. And a couple of years ago, you actually did need. But now all they want to know is to make sure that your organization is the organization that they pulled up in the system. So this has gone from something that I would say would take organizations, and even a couple of months ago, maybe about a year ago, would take a couple of different steps. And now they have streamlined it significantly where you put in relatively simple information. It pulls up, you press submit, and the timeline it should take now is about 5 to 10 business days for you to get a UEI. Now, that's granted, they're able to pull you up, which is great.
Mine came in like 3. It was really fast.
Yeah, so I mean, these are processes that they're streamlining, which is really great. So for those of you who've worked in this space a couple of years ago, whew, took the act of God and Congress to get through some of these registrations, but they have brought all these systems together, which is a great thing. And they've made this a lot easier on you guys to get this information. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen. I'm going to make sure, I'm going to put that on my list of things to do, Jesus, to send like a step-by-step tutorial. And I'll just pick a random organization and blot it out, out of respect for the organization that I'm using to show people the step-by-step.
Yeah, that'd be helpful. We can include it in a follow-up and place it on our website
and
as
send that
well.
out to everybody so they kind of know what to expect as they're going through processes. But literally, once you get past that page we were just on, it's one other step. You press submit, and you're good to go.
You're great.
Does anyone else have any questions?
Yeah. I just want to open up for questions. Anything that Justice covered regarding the UEI, or any just other questions regarding the grant program itself? No? Well, if anything else comes up, you all have our contact information. Please don't hesitate to reach out. That is all the content and information we had for you all today. So, we'll give you some of your time back for the morning. And we just want to thank you for tuning in to this session. We really appreciate it. And please be on the lookout for a follow-up email with some of this information, and a short survey. They received GLR funding in the past. Can we apply for funding for the same parcel of land overlapping acreage? So if it's still currently under GLRI funding, is it still currently under GLRI funding? Or being funded through GLRI funds?
No, it's not any longer.
So then it would still be eligible for funding under this
Okay.
grant.
Perfect. Thank you.
Your question. All right. Well, thank you all so much. That concludes it.
Thank
Have a good
you.
day.
Thank you, guys.